Hey, Dr. Kurt Steele here. Hope everyone's doing well. Had a couple of things happen and got asked a question that just made me think to uh, create this video. I got asked, what do you do differently than most other coaches and consultants? And my response to that would be number one, most consultants, they'll basically gather your numbers, look at your numbers, and say, hey, here's a number that's off, here's a number that's off, let's work on that. And then you go to your team and then that's all they hear about is their weaknesses. And I interviewed a guy named Coach Philip Fulmer, who is a Hall of Fame college football coach, and interviewed him during a live stream when we were putting out the book, We're Not Selling, We're Winning. And he said, Kurt, a lot of business owners make the mistake of concentrating so much on fixing things and fixing their weaknesses, they forget to maximize their strengths. So one of the first questions I love to ask, and I actually do a culture transformation guide with your team, either solo or before I come to your practice. They're very effective. And the first question I ask them is, what's important to you and what do you do well? And we make that the foundation of the practice. And you can see them kind of light up, even let them work on that for a week or two and notice each other doing those things well. So instead of coming in and saying, okay, here's your numbers, and we got to see more people, we got to sell more stuff, we got to extend your hours. If anybody's ever heard me talk, I think life's more of a bell curve. I've seen practices, I think, that work too many hours. I've seen practices, I think, that try to see too many patients. What I want to do is build a culture with you and your team where you can work 4.5 days a week and work normal hours and still have that multi-million-dollar, very successful practice that you're looking for. And while we're talking about this, I also want to maybe talk about who I'm not for. I see a lot on Facebook here lately, and I just think this is such wasted energy. I'm a big believer that life is 10% what happens and 90% how you respond. It's one of my favorite sayings. I would actually even change it to life is 1%, what happens and 99% how you respond. I really think that you have more control over your practice than any outside entity. I didn't build this practice looking for boogeymen and scapegoats. Whether it's this big conglomerate or this group or this online retailer or vision plans, and they certainly all do have their things that we have to overcome as independent practitioners, but they are such a small percentage of what might be going on in your practice that you need to fix. It is a very small percentage. You have to have the courage to look at yourself in the mirror first, because number one, if you're the doctor owner, you are the culture of the practice and you run the practice, and it ultimately comes to you. And a matter of fact, you'll see it in a testimonial or two of mine. I have doctors tell me, they say I can tell Dr. Steele really cares, but he also asks the tough questions. And I do ask the tough questions because until you are willing to look at yourself first and then look at how you affect your team and how you affect your practice, there's not a marketing strategy or sales technique that's going to save your practice. It starts with you, and it starts with the culture that you build. And you got to have the courage to do that. And then you got to look at the data to make informed decisions. The data is important, and we use that as the steering wheel. But the way you run the practice and your team is the engine. We got to get the engine going first. Then we got to use the data to steer it, and then we got to have the faith in ourselves and maybe something bigger that it's all going to turn out well. But to me, it's just all about building that culture. So, and it came to mind today because I found out that a relatively local practice here that I thought was doing really well sold to Equity. Now, just like I said, you don't want to chase boogeymen. Equity is not optometry's problem whatsoever, and everybody's got their own situations, their own family situations, and financial situations, and selling to Equity is not a bad thing. If that's what's right for you and your family, then fantastic, do that. I just want to make sure that we all know that there are other options, and I just also honestly think that the more independent optometry can stay and we own our own practices, the stronger we are as a profession. So that's kind of the fight that I have picked. Maybe crusade might be a better word. As I, get in my late 50s, I really want to help independent practices know that there are options besides when you get to a certain level you have to sell. And you don't have to do it by seeing more people, and you don't have to do it by killing yourself. You can do it by building a very successful normal hour practice with a winning culture and a winning team. So if that interests you, schedule a discovery call with me. You can go to my website to do that, www.drkurtsteele.com. And I was trying to come up with a cute catchphrase, and I feel like I'm a really genuine person. So I was sitting there thinking, and it occurred to me, I don't really need a catchphrase, which is actually kind of a cool catchphrase. So this is Dr. Kurt Steele, and I don't need a catchphrase.